Okay, so let me just go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, perfect. Hopefully everyone can see this. Yeah, okay, cool. So this session will sort of be on lessons learned from years with undergraduate research journals. And I'm joined by Dr. Marcia Graves and Dr. David Oliver. Do you two want to sort of introduce yourselves and explain sort of what your passions are and what your research interests are at the University of British Columbia?
Want to start, Dave? You go first.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Marcia. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for the invite, Vishwanath. So my role at UBC, I've been at UBC since 2014. I'm currently an associate professor of teaching, and my role is primarily to teach, well, one of my roles is upper level research courses in microbiology at UBC. So all of the majors in the microbiology program take upper level research courses called CURES, which stands for course-based undergraduate research experiences. And these are large-scale classes where students work on teams to take on authentic scientific research projects and design them themselves and carry them out in the lab. The cures that I teach we'll probably go into this later, but were developed in 2001 by my predecessor, Dr. Bill Ramey. And so I adopted these courses in 2014 from Dr. Ramey, and part of these courses from their inception in 2001 is an undergraduate research journal that the students publish in called the Undergraduate Journal of Experimental Microbiology and Immunology. So the acronym is UGEMI. So I have been working with UGEMI as a faculty lead since 2014, and we've developed a peer-reviewed arm of UGEMI and kept it running. So I'll stop there and I'll pass it over to Marcia, because I imagine these are some of the topics we'll get into in a bit.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dave. And yeah, I appreciate the invite, and it's really nice to join everyone this morning. So my name is Marcia Graves. I'm an associate professor of teaching in the same department as Dave in microbiology and immunology at the University of British Columbia. And yeah, like Dave, I've also engaged in some of the teaching in our CURE labs, but certainly more recently, and we'll probably touch on this, but we've been trying to expand the disciplines that students are engaging in with their research questions. And so we co-developed an immunology-based CURE, and I've been leading that the last couple of years. But otherwise, my role in the department is teaching at the third year level. So I teach a more inquiry-based lab to really help prep students for the CURE experience. So trying to, develop their independent research skills. And my interests are really in how students engage with the primary literature and how to, kind of sense making within the primary literature, reading data and evaluating and really, critical reading of the literature. So those are some of my kind of scholarship of teaching and learning interests. So yeah, it's nice to join you, and I'm happy to share my perspectives on this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, here we go. Okay. So today we're going to be going over two general topics, both with 2 prompts each. And then towards the end, if we hopefully have enough time, we'll be having miscellaneous questions from the chat. So I guess we can start off on topic 1. Topic 1 is, how can undergraduate research journals grapple with original research? And sort of what I mean by that should be sort of clear in prompt number 1. But essentially, like, original research is the idea of, like, presenting new information in a research project rather than sort of writing like a lit review or like maybe a scientific feature on a particular new discovery. And in general, original research is sort of always a way to increase the profile of an undergraduate research journal. And by profile, I mean like get academicians and general people that are sort of skeptical about undergraduate research journals interested in it. And you two both worked on this paper that I thought was honestly, I thought it was inspiring that there was when I first read it, that there was a place where faculty were so passionate and interested in sort of exploring undergraduate research as original research as something to do through a cure. But anyway, you sort of outline a submission process, a pipeline, I guess, of going from a study design idea to executing the study to writing a paper on it. I believe this took like the course of, I want to say 16 weeks. Is that true? Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
And I was so intrigued by that I thought to myself, I wonder if like undergraduate research journals themselves can sort of do this process. And that is kind of the prompt for today. The prompt for, oh, wait, sorry, actually, maybe that is prompt number 2. Prompt number 1 is sort of okay, sorry, my bad. I got a little bit excited. Prompt number 1 is about soliciting original research. Obviously, on UGEMI, faculty are the people that sort of accept and peer review the papers that are submitted. Many undergraduate research journals around the country solicit undergraduate original research as well. Usually these are from cure-style courses that those research journals are not running themselves, or they're from capstone projects or even lab projects that professors have given permission to submit. But do you think that undergraduate students are often equipped to edit original research papers, even if they are penned by fellow undergrads rather than by professors? So why don't we start with Dr. Oliver, maybe?
Sure, I could comment from how how our journal runs at UGEMI, and Dr. Graves has a lot of perspective on student writing and peer review and these sorts of things. So in terms of how do we operate the journal in terms of soliciting papers? So I would say UGEMI is approximately 90% driven by papers coming out of our cure courses. So those papers go through a stepwise development process from individual proposal, team proposal, research proposal, all the way up to oral presentations, and then finally a draft research paper. So that's the disciplined process, and the process at the end of the course involves editing from the teaching assistants who are graduate students, as well as the instructor. And once the paper is revised and in an acceptable form for publication in UGEMI, then it's accepted and a final grade is assigned in the cure. So we don't, for 90% of the papers, solicit submissions, but we do open submissions up to external universities, students, undergraduates in other universities. And for that process, we actually have a requirement in UGEMI that the paper is endorsed by the mentor at that external university. So if it's University of Calgary, a student wants to submit to University of British Columbia at UGEMI, then their principal investigator that they worked with provides an endorsement letter, even just a few sentences saying that they supervise the work and it's scientifically sound, and they're they're happy seeing it published. So we do request that at UGEMI to ensure that the research is solid and that it's been scrutinized by a mentor. So that sort of parallels the UGEMI experience for the CURE students who go through the end of term editorial process. In terms of why we, it might be worth just mentioning why we bother publishing original research, because as you mentioned, there's other things that we could think about publishing, like synthesis of collected information, review papers, these sorts of things. We use it because it's the product that helps us teach the process of doing research. And so the students work through the process of research, as Vishwanath suggested, over 16 weeks, so 4 months. So it's fairly compressed research experience. But the students walk through that discipline process, and their goal is to publish a responsible, a responsible research paper that can be disseminated online and people around the world can read it. And the findings are concretely sound, and the limitations of the study are explicitly stated. And that's working quite well to move our CURE forward and our students towards authentic research, I think. I'll pass it over to Marcia so I don't eat up all the airspace here.
Yeah, I can add a couple of things, especially around this, kind of the prompt question of whether or not undergraduate students are equipped at this stage to edit original research papers. And I would say to that, I mean, as Dave describes, our model in UGEMI is to not necessarily rely on undergraduates to peer review when students in our CURES or other undergraduates who are seeking to submit to UGEMI from other institutions. Our peer review process engages with graduate students, postdocs as our reviewers. So we're kind of reaching to sort of a next level of folks in their training to review these papers ahead of publishing in our peer-reviewed arm of UGEMI called UGEMI Plus. So it's a really great question about whether or not other journals that are relying on undergraduate students for the entire process are sort of equipped with the skills to do that. And I think that they can be, but I would just caution that it would take explicit instruction. So in my experience, working with, kind of senior level students at the 3rd and 4th year undergraduate level, they're certainly capable of critical reading of data, but in my experience, they really need some training in that area to kind of have the confidence to evaluate critically and to not sort of take things as set in stone when things are written in a kind of publication style manuscript. So I think with proper training and practice, they certainly can, but I would say that would be essential component of relying on undergraduates to do the peer review. But having said that, I definitely have experiences in my classes where I do engage the students to peer review each other's work, and it works extremely well to give like really actionable quality feedback. But it has to be kind of built into the process and built into the system that they are, provided with some practice to be able to do so. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, thank you. I think we had maybe a question from Jay. I don't know if he still has a question.
If I could do a quick one, I was cautioned that questions are taken to the end, but I'm actually fully unfamiliar with CURE-based courses. I was wondering if I could just get a quick explanation of what those are, how they're structured, and sort of the goal of them overall.
Right. So I can comment, Jay, on that. So a CURE is it stands for course-based undergraduate research experience, and they are essentially scalable research models for undergraduate courses. And so if you think about maybe a thesis-based, we call it in Canada an honors-based program, you're talking about typically in research, a mentor to mentee ratio of 1-to-1. But this doesn't accommodate all of the students that wish and need to get into research experiences in an undergraduate setting. And so cures have been developed where you take a large cohort of students. We're currently teaching 60 students in our upper level cure, and they divide themselves up. We divide them up into four people per team approximately, and the teams then walk through a disciplined process of designing a research question, refining the research question, writing about it as a formal proposal, and then executing their experiments in the lab. So there are different forms of cures. This is one that we have been developing at UBC since 2001. Many other universities around the world essentially have developed cure-like courses. You know, the scholarly sort of community has put forth 5 domains of a cure that we hope to touch on as part of the experience that students get out of it. One of those domains is that students experience scientific practices, that there's broad meaning to the research that they're doing, perhaps outside of the walls of the classroom. So this original research topic and the idea of an undergraduate research journal fits that broad meaning category. That students are actively engaged in collaborative processes. Modern science is team-based, and so students should be collaborating at some level. There should be elements of discovery, brand new, small, sometimes larger discoveries that comes out of that original research experience, and the ownership that comes of that discovery is really, we know it's really essential to a cure experience to motivate students. And that also sort of leads into the undergraduate research journal idea, is that this ownership of the research is really motivating to students. And finally, that there's an iterative process happening, whether it's repeating experiments or refining thinking and revising hypotheses, et cetera. So those are the 5 big domains that we try to touch on in a cure experience. Does that help, Jay?
Yeah, immensely. I have a bunch of little questions still, so I would love at the end maybe some pointers to some resources. But I have a much better overall understanding for sure. Thank you.
Cool.
Perfect. Thank you. So let's move on to our next prompt, which I sort of alluded to earlier. In 2019, you both received a UBC grant to further expand the CURE program, providing students with both a wet lab portion and a dry lab portion that was focused on data science. My question is, and it's a bit, I don't know, controversial maybe, is do you think it's possible the universities could implement similar projects dedicated to providing undergraduate research experiences? And I guess the controversial part is, do you think it's possible for students to run smaller scale projects with their own wet or dry lab components? I guess this was something that I was discussing with Dr. Sun over Zoom a while ago. And I sort of wanted to know, like, how can universities, or how can, like, maybe perhaps student-run journals themselves create sort of wet labs, essentially, that would allow other students to come up with, like, original research. And we chatted about it for a long time. And towards the end, it became clear that the process was, like, very complicated and very difficult. So maybe you two have some thoughts on whether or not it's possible, or like how much effort it would take, or maybe perhaps the effort would be too great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good question. Maybe I'll jump in. I mean, I think, this isn't that insightful, but I think the thing I jump to first is resources. It just is a resource intensive endeavor. And not just talking about the lab space, especially for the wet lab experience, or for servers to accommodate data science approaches. But I think it's people. So one of we kind of always refer to it as the heart of the cures, which are really the team meetings. And so during the sort of discipline process that Dave describes over the 16 weeks, the students are really mentored week to week with a teaching assistant, with faculty involvement is really critical to drive their thinking and to guide their experimental design and their analysis. And so having the support from experienced researchers guiding their work is really, really an important part of how they're mentored for success in the cure. So to me, having the right individuals involved in the process is really part of the resource intensive aspect of running a cure. And I guess I could comment on our process for developing the data science cure. Again, it came down to building a team of like disciplinary experts, just a group of people with unique expertise in course design in the areas where we were looking to sort of drive the original research in microbiology and microbiome research, to really put together the components of that course required multiple people with different expertise. So I would say, yeah, one of the things that would be a driver of it would be having the right group of individuals, which can be difficult depending on the institution or what resources are available. But I'll let Dave comment. I'm sure he has more to say.
Perhaps,
Yeah,
maybe, sorry, before Dr. Oliver goes in, maybe if students are interested in running these projects, maybe you could suggest like how they could maybe go about doing something, whether that's like working in a research lab, or maybe I know that at UC Davis, at least, which is where I went to undergrad, undergrads had the option of creating their own like first year seminar where they would bring in like freshmen typically to delve into a particular topic. So you'd have like, for example, we had clubs that would run like a first year seminar on how to write a research paper or how to get published in the undergraduate research journal on campus. Maybe you had some insights on like how students could go about getting those experiences.
That's a good question. So yeah, I mean, I think as Dave chatted about earlier, one of the ways in which students seek out research experiences is through research labs at the institution in more of an internship style research experience. Of course, the drawback to that is that not everyone has those opportunities, so that can be kind of limiting. And for folks, especially that don't kind of understand the culture of the university and to really reach out and ask for those kinds of opportunities, it can be really limiting to who gets those experiences. But yeah, it's an interesting question. And, I like that idea of students getting together and, building a first year seminar that helps with some of those other scientific process skills like writing papers and things like that. But I would say that's kind of different from actually getting into the lab and actually engaging in authentic research. So yeah, it's a really challenging problem. And I think that's why, the CURE model is nice because, as Dave mentions, it's scalable so that many more students can have this experience, and it's embedded in our undergraduate program so that all students moving through the program gain the experience, and it isn't selective to those like seeking and able to get those experiences. So yeah, I'm afraid I don't have like a great solution there, but I'm going to think on it and pass it off to Dave in case he's got some better ideas.
Yeah, this is a new idea in terms of how would students implement some sort of cure or cure-like course. It is the scale and the scope. I mean, I know that in our department, if I think back and if I were to think, we didn't have a cure right now, but cures are active around the world, and they're very successful and very well documented in the literature as being successful. If a group of students came to us at our university, in our department, and said, we would like to do this, I think our department, if we had the administrative support, from our department head, I think they would probably look for a way for a faculty member to support a student-run experience, a student-led experience, and the faculty member could provide some guidance. Now, whether that would just be a paper-based research investigation, or whether the wet lab would be opened up to students is sort of open to question, and budget, I would think. But something that students, I mean, not to sort of advertise our own paper, but we did publish a paper looking at the structure and function of both a wet lab cure and a data science cure that we've developed. And something like that could be used as a basic framework for faculty and students to build a similar experience. And so there are other courses that are described in the literature. So starting with published documentation might be able to push you in the right direction. Jay, we can pop that paper up in the chat, or both of the papers, and the UGEMI paper, because they may be something that would give a student a way forward in terms of approaching faculty.
Yeah, I'll definitely put those two papers in the chat sort of once we're at the end of our session. But yeah. Next, I sort of want to delve into our next topic, which is sort of what the benefits and pitfalls of purely student-run research journals are compared to faculty-run ones. So I think most of the students that are at this conference are in like purely student-run research journals. So students are in charge of soliciting papers, editing them, and publishing them on the website or in a print edition. So the actual prompt is, and there's sort of a bit of a long preamble to this question, but there was a student-run research journal at the University of Pennsylvania, which in 2006 published a paper explaining what students gain from their experience. And it was interesting because student board members and editors claimed that they were most proud of the leadership skills that they developed, as well as their knowledge of the research process and, general knowledge that contributed towards confirming like their career path. However, they did say that the body of work published in their journal was not sort of something that they were super proud of, or it ranked low. Sorry, it ranked low relative to the skills that they gained from working on the journal. And currently this is the only publication that I'm aware of that was conducted by students on a student-run undergraduate research journal. So it might be representative of all undergraduate research journals, it might not. But my question is, how can faculty members facilitate the improvement of student editing skills and the overall quality of a undergraduate research journal, perhaps to make students more proud of the work that they submit without taking control of the research journal from them? Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind would be like I certainly think that this balance is important to strike because I've certainly seen it in other kind of leadership roles I have. It brings to mind a PA training program that I run that I'm really sort of take the back seat as faculty lead, but it's really about graduate students and TAs running the training program. So it's kind of akin to that. And I think that's really important because it really provides a platform for students to be building these kinds of skills that are, super transferable to their careers and moving forward. What I would suggest in terms of faculty advisors improving student editing skills and those specific skills about increasing the quality perhaps of the published papers would perhaps just be to run workshops to model that process and to but those could be kind of one-off events that just help build the skills and perhaps there could be what I find helpful for editing and reviewing papers is kind of a calibration exercise where perhaps you take a few examples ranging in quality and have the student editing team review them as well as the faculty member, and then you sit down and you compare and you kind of calibrate the feedback and seeing more expert level feedback would probably be quite helpful to to get them to apply that as they review more papers. So those kinds of workshopping events or calibration exercises would probably go a long way to help model those skills.
Nice. I would just add to that, in terms of UGEMI and our ability to kind of guide students through the process of publishing papers, we often have a philosophical shift near the end of the course. If we surveyed the students and asked them why they're publishing in UGEMI, or we actually have a student-run undergraduate journal at UBC as well, the Canadian Journal of Undergraduate Research, CJUR. Often the response is that they're looking for some sort of point on their CV, a credit to their CV with a publication. And the perception sometimes from the outset is that more is better, in the sense that if the claims that the paper sort of states are significant, then the paper has more value and more it's more important in general sense. And so near the end of the course, we talk about the responsibility of publication and the idea that a simple, small finding that's well controlled and accurately documented in their paper has a lot more value to the students in the long run, over say 10, 30 years or whatever it is, their full career, than a paper that overstates its claims. And so we shift the philosophy a little bit towards stating something concretely, even if it's a small incremental advance. And that, I think, really improves the quality of the UGEMI papers. The UGEMI Plus papers, especially the ones that are peer-reviewed, go out to subject matter experts around the world, and rarely, if ever, do they really critique the paper heavily. Often they're quite satisfied with the result. Even if it's a small finding, it's sufficient for an undergraduate research publication, and the journal is publishing credible information. So I think philosophically we just sort of temper some of the expectations in terms of what the claims are going to say, and the students can stand behind their papers long term. So I'm not sure why the University of Pennsylvania, their undergraduate journal was considered sort of lower quality research papers, if it's because the claims were overstated or if it wasn't making significant advances. But at least from our journal's perspective at UBC, small advances that are concrete are valued much more than large claims that are a bit flimsy and sort of unsubstantiated. I'll pass it back.
Sorry, I was just about to say, Dr. Oliver, I'm so glad you brought up CJUR, because that is sort of the topic of our next prompt. So as I say here, UBC also has a student-run journal, CJR, which mainly focuses on literature reviews. However, unlike many undergraduate research publications, while the solicitation and ultimate decision to publish papers is handled by student board members, the editing process is conducted by graduate students and faculty members. And I wanted to sort of ask if this is sort of what perhaps like a standard for student publication should be, where students sort of only handle like the leadership skills, I guess, that we sort of went over in the previous prompt, while leaving like the editing and sort of the level of credibility of the papers actually published to like faculty members. And I guess both of you can go more into sort of how CJR handles student submissions, and what you see are like the positives of having CJR, and how it sort of is different from UGEMI, and maybe your involvement with CJR if it's applicable.
Yeah, should I comment first, Marcia? I'll just comment. So I've been sort of loosely involved with CJR over several years. It is a student-run journal, and so the students are quite involved in running their journal, and so I'm very sort of like advisory in terms of how it operates. But early on in CJR's development, it was reviewed by undergraduate editors, and then they switched to the student board editing, or the graduate student board and faculty board editing process, and some of that came evolved because of growing pains. They got a bit of pushback from faculty that the papers perhaps weren't sufficiently scrutinized for publication, and they improved the process. So I think CJR has made great strides towards providing higher quality publications. Their input in terms of papers coming from undergraduates is much broader than UGEMI. It's a general research journal, so they're receiving papers from students all around, I guess, around the world, and many from many departments at UBC. I'll just say that I'm not sure if this is the right way to do it. I do like the idea of it being arm's length, the editorial and review process being arm's length from the authorship process, and having graduate students with some experience and faculty members participate in that process does provide this objectivity and I think more credibility to the research journal. So I think it is an interesting model that seems to be working right now. So yeah, I'll just pass it over to Marcia.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is kind of a nice happy medium. I was just going to add that, when they move to having the editing process conducted by graduate students, I agree with Dave that having that arm's length, editor, I think works really well. But I would add that it's a nice happy medium to provide graduate students opportunity to review papers in their own learning journey and their own professional development, reviewing papers. So I would say that, I think volunteer faculty members is great, but I would suggest that even better would be graduate students and postdocs, to be gaining that experience. But yeah, perhaps that is a happy medium.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that it was sort of student run in terms of the editing as well before. And I was wondering maybe if you two have any like, I don't know, I want to say like anecdotes perhaps about like was there any like disagreement among students when they sort of switched to that model? Like were students happy or unhappy that they were like perhaps like in their eyes like losing editing privileges to the journal? How did the students feel, if you know? Sorry.
I don't know, to be honest, Jay, if there was any sort of challenges with switching the editorial process. I do know that CJUR at UBC, I know many of the students involved in CJUR, and they're really great students and really engaged, scientists and researchers. So the willingness to evolve the journal to provide a more credible product, it was very, I mean, in my opinion, it was very fluid, and the students were more than willing to adapt in order to do something a little bit stronger. And I think at one point, anecdotally, there was an instance where a paper had been submitted by students at a, early stage, say first or second year university. And it came out of a course where it was sort of a review paper that perhaps wasn't really original research, and it didn't really provide a lot of new knowledge. And one of the faculty members complained to the journal, indicating that research wasn't as original as it perhaps should have been or claimed to be. And CJUR responded quite well and adapted their process. So yeah, I don't think there was a lot of pushback in terms of losing control over the editorial process. My impression is that there's no shortage of work for the people that are working with CJUR in terms of managing the peer review process. I know at UGEMI, our editors work very hard in the summers to move papers around to different peer reviewers. So I think the CJUR students are sufficiently busy keeping their journal running well.
Yeah, thank you for your your insights. So in the last 5 minutes of this session, I was sort of hoping I could get maybe some questions from the chat. Perhaps, if Jay wants to go into more of the questions he had earlier, or perhaps other people had questions. If you guys could just raise your hands using the function on Zoom, we can sort of make a queue.
Vishwanath, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Jay, if you're there, does your university have any cures at this point?
So, actually, sort of lending to my initial confusion, we have a CURE, which is the Center for Undergraduate Research Engagement. It's an administrative function. And so at first I was like, oh, that's weird that you have multiple, like what does that mean? As far as I know, and I think there's some differences because we're a trimester-based system and not a semester-based one. So a 16-week course isn't something we have. Yeah. The closest we have is what we'd call our ARCs. So in my freshman year, I joined the Global Engagement ARC. We did a project over our whole freshman year that sort of culminated in a research project, but similar to it was less sort of technically prescribed. It was not really an exploration into the research process led by a faculty researcher. The faculty member was there to help facilitate the process and sort of help move along the research process, but it was not strict academic research or building those skills. And so definitely one of the things I'm most interested in is taking away from this is how the CURE model can be sort of adapted to from where I'm from, the University of Oregon.
Okay, great. Yeah.
So I am just quickly finding the citations for your papers online, and I can link those in the chat. Yeah. So first,
I definitely can ask a quick question. I certainly have a few. So that's one of the things you mentioned that was particularly interesting to me was the faculty involvement in the editing process. I've been with RJ, the undergraduate research journal here, longer than is usually technically possible since I'm a fifth-year senior and I've been here since my freshman year. As a result, I do have a very good understanding that our limitation as an undergraduate research journal, especially an interdisciplinary one, is that we don't always, in fact, almost always, we lack the skills to provide a thorough academic revision of the discipline's specific, like to the discipline specific qualities and statistics. So even if we understand when something needs to be better explained, that doesn't necessarily mean we understand if it's wrong or right, the extent of it, if it conflicts with other claims in the general literature. And so to that end, I guess moving from this editorial to faculty, at least supported model, what are your recommendations?
I mean, one of the challenges that kind of comes to mind immediately is the disciplinary focus. So if I had to review a paper in chemistry or in history, I would struggle. I mean, I could provide some sort of cursory overview of sort of the writing, but the disciplinary piece of it would be hard. So I think CJUR at UBC, the undergrad run journal that's quite broad, I think that's one of the major challenges that they find is providing reviews, even if they're at the undergraduate level, of broad disciplinary papers is tough. UGEMI at UBC, because it's disciplinary, I think actually some of our senior undergrads who, maybe have taken the course in term 1, but in term 2 are, they're past the course, they'd probably be capable of doing a nice peer review work. So I think the disciplinary focus is a challenge in terms of quality. Yeah, Marcia, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have one suggestion. I agree that it's really difficult across disciplines. I agree with Dave. It'd be really challenging for me to review like far outside my field. My suggestion would be to reach out to grad student organizations in the departments that are relevant to the papers that you're looking to publish. In my experience, graduate students, at least at our institution, many of them are really interested in gaining more experience to branch out outside the lab or outside of their research project and to gain skills that may be relevant for their career goals as a PI or even moving into industry or what have you. So yeah, I would think reaching out to grad student based organizations would be a good way to go. And perhaps from there, just networking similarly to postdoc associations, if you have them at your institutions. I think getting faculty involvement will be really a tough sell. I think everyone is so kind of overextended and can be really difficult to get those commitments. But grad students and postdocs would be a great resource.
My thoughts exactly in regards to faculty is not a super consumable option. The grad student idea is a really good one. I will definitely look into that. Vishwanath, if there's time, can I ask another question?
I think you can ask another question, but I can't guarantee that the breakout room will close before it's done. But yeah, I think go for it.
Okay. One of the ways we've been trying to expand our journal is to not just edit papers before they're published, but to try and create programs and contribute to programs that create more publishable manuscripts. One of that sounds very promising is this Curative Cure program. I wanted to know if you have any recommendations for students looking to help support or start this process, and furthermore, how it could fit into a term system based on a versus a semester system.